Hi everyone, this is SWRPG Guides, and I am here bringing you another encounter video. The last one I did was regarding an encounter with a Nexu, and I really enjoyed making that, so I do want to continue making this kind of a series just to give people ideas for encounters that they can do with their groups. And this one's going to be a little bit different. I think it's something that maybe some GMs might be nervous or even afraid to explore, kind of the diplomatic, more, having conversations in encounters, really bringing NPCs to life with their ability to speak, and also allowing their players to really roleplay in a diplomatic fashion. So this is going to be very different. It's going to be focused on those, again, diplomacy-focused characters. And one thing that I did want to provide, just kind of as a side note, is just the Politico talent tree, and the Politico is probably the main one that you're going to focus on in this type of encounter, but that doesn't mean that it's limited. There are many other type of careers and specializations that would do well in this type of situation. So the ones, again, who are focused on charm, coercion, deception, and knowledge skills, those are the main ones, and also negotiation, leadership. I think it's also good to point those out. So one thing, first off, and this is true for any encounter, is if you're looking to come up with some ideas or think about how you can include your characters. And I think that's the most important thing in this game, or one of the most, is when you're making an encounter idea, or if you're coming up with a session, you should be looking to include every single person in that scenario. You don't want to leave anyone out. So, for instance, if you have a scenario where you're going to a diplomatic mission, and let's say the Politico is the one that you're really focusing on in this type of scenario, this is their chance to shine and kind of show what their skills are, what they paid all their XP for. That doesn't mean that the other players should just kind of stand around. Now, if you have a character who's mainly focused on combat, you should still try to interact with them and come up with ways to include them in the situation. So, for instance, you could have them, maybe they notice someone who's strange and they or they want to go check out something that they're seeing. Could be really anything, but don't just focus on the person who's maybe the best at diplomacy. You want to include everyone, and that's the same with combat. And there is going to be some give and take in a given session, depending on what the situation is. Not everyone is going to have a huge role in what you're doing, so it's important to, I think, space it out, try to include everyone. I definitely focus my sessions around what my characters do. I don't want anyone to pick a specialization and then never get to use the skills. I think that's really frustrating if I'm a player and I only, let's say it's all combat or it's mostly combat and I don't do well in combat, then I'm not going to have fun. So I think in this type of situation where you have someone who's maybe chosen a Politico, and this is not a very common thing. I don't think I've ever had anyone do a Politico. In fact, even the colonists in general is not something that you see very often. I think there's so many things that you can do with this type of character. It's just that a lot of GMs don't explore this as much as they can. So, again, start with the talent tree and look at what the skills are, and then see where you can take those things in a situation. So it's kind of like you're starting at the end and working your way back in order to come up with your situation. So, if you look through this talent tree, there's going to be a lot of things dealing, again, with coercion and charm and taking, black dice away from your charm checks, leadership checks, forcing people to take strain when you're talking to them. So all these different types of things that can be done. And the great thing about, I think, these skills is you don't have to just have a Politico focused on diplomacy or political missions in order for them to use this. They can use this in many situations. As long as they are interacting with some type of NPC, then they're going to be able to use a lot of these skills. But given that, we're going to just kind of move back and look into some encounter ideas first. And then we'll start with what I think is important to kind of start out with when you're doing a diplomatic mission. So obviously, the first thing, like I mentioned, you want to have something for all the players to do. You want to have an idea of the larger scale of things. So this might be something that you kind of do on the side. Let's say you have a big mission. You're trying to there's been like a black market deal that's been going on, and there's the Black Suns or maybe the CSA are involved. This is like the main kind of organization that you're either trying to infiltrate or you're trying to defend maybe a planet from, or an individual from. And then you can kind of weave in these stories of, diplomacy in there, and kind of get involved in, the Republic Senate, or maybe even the like Imperial Senate, which, kind of goes with depending on the era that you're in. But I think the first thing is just to come up with some diplomatic characters, some NPCs that you can use. So, have like a senator, have someone who's maybe the leader of a planet, have someone who's maybe a crooked politician, or someone who, works hand in hand with a lot of political types. So maybe some type of wealthy benefactor, that is involved in politics and is kind of pulling the strings maybe. So come up with that type of scenario, figure out what the players are going to be first. And really, I think with a diplomatic type of situation, it's important to come up with what the motivations are for the characters, what they're trying to do. Are they, maybe they are a really good politician and their interest is in their planet or in their people. Whereas you might have the crooked politician who they are trying to look out for themselves. They're looking for wealth. They're looking to maybe, make a good situation with the Empire. They're trying to partner up with the Empire to kind of, preserve their self-interest, something like that. So figure out what the motivations are of the characters that you want to use. And I think also involving intrigue of any kind, whether it be, the mystery of why a politician is maybe doing a certain action, or let's say, some type of financial situation. Maybe, someone has an incredible amount of debt that they are trying to get rid of. So, come up with some type of intrigue, something that makes the diplomacy worthwhile. You don't want to have them just kind of speaking to a politician about, random things. You want there to be something that they're kind of prodding for. They're looking for, certain piece of information that they're trying to get out. And this is where those checks will kind of come in. You can charm someone in order to get information. So you always want to have some type of mystery or some type of question that the players are trying to answer in order for them to gain the information that they need. So I think that's important for the setup. Also, I think it's important to kind of have the setting for it. I think, it's easy to kind of come up with, if you're in Age of Rebellion, to come up with some type of, rebel base or some type of military, type of setting. If you're on a planet and you're in a forest or something, that it's kind of easy to come up with those type of settings. But like coming up with a consulate setting, what might the consulate look like? Where might the players be able to go in some type of consulate? Who might they meet? There's probably a lot of people going in and out, so there's going to be a lot of interactions. There's going to be a lot of NPCs who are, kind of interacting with the players. And I think that's good for this too, because if you have more characters in a situation, and let's say they're looking for a specific person or they're trying to find something, then it makes it harder for them. They don't, they might not know exactly what they're looking for or who they're looking for. And, that kind of adds a little bit more depth into the story. So with that being said, I will say I don't think, diplomatic missions are not something you want to kind of flood a campaign with. You don't want to have too much of this. If it's focused around that, it is going to get quite dry. And, it is, again, it's based off of the intrigue that you create. If there isn't any intrigue, it's going to be even more dry. So you do want to connect everything to a larger story. So if you, go back to my campaign creation, I think it's important to plot out your story points beforehand in order to make sure that everything fits well. And this is actually something that I've come in trouble, or there's been a little bit of trouble with this in my campaign that I'm running now, is that depending on what the players do, I am having to adjust the way I take things. And a lot of times it takes until the next session for me to realize that it's actually not making as much sense as maybe I thought it would, or the motivation for the players to be doing things is not apparent in the first place. Now, the tricky thing with this is you cannot force a players to be motivated to do something. And this is something that will depend on the players. And it might be something that before you start your campaign, you might want to make a ground rule like, hey, if I'm proposing a situation, it doesn't help for you to say, oh, this, first of all, it's not in my best interest. Second of all, I might get hurt or it's dangerous. Third of all, if I'm not making money, then I'm not going to do it. That, I think, is not a good way to approach things as a player at all. And it's something that if you're a GM and you're noticing this with players, it might be good to just force players into certain situations that you want them to be in. Now, you can, and I've said this before as well, you can have it open, and I think it's good to be open, but it can be a vicious cycle if you are creating situations for players and they're constantly figuring out ways to not do it. Then it's not really fun. So I think it's important to, when you're coming up with a situation, sometimes you have to just take reason out of it and say, listen, don't say this to the players, but hopefully have them understand that the reason we are moving on to this situation is maybe, it's not the most super, reasonable thing, or maybe your character isn't motivated to do this, but it's going to be interesting and it's going to be something that will push the story forward. And I think it makes sense with the story. So that's kind of a hard line to walk. And I say this just because I think diplomatic missions, it will be really easy for, Grog, the bodyguard or the mercenary, to say, yeah, I don't want to go into the Republic Senate and talk to, a senator. Like, that's understandable that they wouldn't want to do that. But unfortunately, that's just something that they're going to have to deal with. There's going to be times when they're fighting. There's going to be times when they're not. So that's, I think, important thing to watch out for diplomatic missions, because it can be easy for this to become a super narrow type of encounter where, again, you're just focusing on that one character who maybe they built a Politico or some type of, diplomacy focused character, and they're trying to, flex their skills a little bit, while the other ones just kind of sit on the side. So that is something to just keep in mind and figure out, and it's even hard to give examples now without having a specific situation, but really go off what the situation is, what your campaign has been like, and go from there. So I think that's kind of a good overview of the setup of it and the motivations of this type of encounter, and how you can kind of work your way through it as a GM to make it as enjoyable as possible. I think another thing to just kind of mention is you will want to practice your role-playing skills as a GM before you go into this, and you're probably going to want to be really, really good at it before you go into this, because this is not it's not concrete stuff. You're going to be talking about diplomacy and politics and markets and things that are just maybe take a lot of practice in order to really talk about in an improvised manner. So I think make sure you understand that, because I think I've said this in another video, the worst thing that you can do as a GM is have a character go into a situation and then they're talking to a really flat or one-dimensional character who can only give the simplest answers, who maybe isn't that interesting, doesn't have much personality. It just takes them out of the situation, and then you kind of put the viewpoint that maybe you're uncomfortable with the role playing, and so now the players are uncomfortable. So just be comfortable with the material that you've set up for this type of encounter. Make sure you understand kind of exactly what the motivations are. This is where the comfort will come in. If you understand your NPC's motivations, their backstory, what they want, what they're looking for, even you could set up some important questions in your mind. Let's say there are questions that the players are going to ask this character. Prepare for those, prepare answers in your head, and then it'll go much smoother that way. So that's kind of the preparation as a GM that I would recommend. And I say this mainly as a GM who is not great at role playing. It's not my favorite thing to do. I much enjoy the storytelling, and I also enjoy describing environments, and describing situations. I really like kind of the third person narrative as a GM. When it comes to first person role playing, I tend to be a little bit weaker, and it's something that you always work on. But I prefer the third person narrative better. Anyways, let's go into the encounters that I've listed. These are just some examples that I kind of came up with on the spot, that I think could be interesting and could maybe get the wheels turning if you are looking to GM, or let's say you're a player and you are looking to go into this type of role, and maybe you're looking for a backstory, or you're looking for something to immerse yourself in the story once you finally get started. You can maybe use these types of situations as kind of inspiration. So the first one, find the separatist informant disguised as a diplomat in the consulate. Now again, that situation, it creates intrigue. It makes a mystery, so the players have to find something, and it's something that all the players have to kind of think about. It's not like just one character is looking for someone. So you can make that in the story. I think that's probably one of the simplest, and maybe it could be maybe the most fun encounters that you can do. Someone, there is some type of rat or informant, somewhere in a political arena or area that you're looking for, you're trying to find, and now you need to look for clues. You need to talk to people. You need to kind of do an investigation in order to figure out who this individual is. The next one is the Republic Senate is about to debate the passing of a bill that would extract crucial resources from your home planet. State your case against this. So this is kind of, again, would be your political's moment to shine. This is exactly what this character was made for. They are standing before the Senate with thousands of people. They need to make a speech. Something that you could even talk to the person beforehand and kind of tell them to expect this to be coming. Like, hey, maybe you should prepare a speech for this. I want you to, to really think about what you're going to say about this. Maybe before the session, just kind of reach out to them and tell them that. I think that's not a bad idea to do that. And I think this is one of those situations where this is that character's chance to shine. The other players will probably take a step back during this. As long as it's not like the entire session, I think it's fine. And also, again, the motivation needs to be there for the party too. So let's say it's just his character's home planet. Maybe you change that to you are representing another planet. To maybe there's a leader that you've been working with, and you're kind of representing them on that. Or let's say your crew is helping this poor country who maybe they need resources. You're going to help them by speaking to the Senate for them. The next one is a wealthy dignitary has asked you to meet them in their office to negotiate terms for a trade between them and the CSA. So this is more of a negotiation type of thing. I think including the corruption in politics of, kind of the corporate underbelly. Maybe if you have some suppliers of war supplies, weapons suppliers, or you have the CSA, which is a big corporate organization in this universe. Have some type of questionable involvement of wealthy individuals in politics, and kind of include the intrigue that way. I think is it's kind of a classic situation. The corrupt politician or the wealthy, corporate sponsor who is pulling all the strings. The next one is the leader of a poor planet has made a bad deal with the Black Suns, help get them out of it. So this is kind of, similar to the other one where you're maybe representing a planet. So this is kind of more involved in the underworld, kind of edge of the empire type of situation. This is like a desperate planet who is, maybe seeking the assistance of your group because you are such a dignified political character. Maybe they're looking for you to assist them with this. Or maybe their government is so corrupt, you're the only one that this particular leader can trust. or it could be just anyone else, maybe not the leader, someone who has the best interest of their planet in mind, and they're looking for you to kind of help them out with it. So, including a deal gone wrong, with that. The next one is a senator was killed in his sleep while staying at a planet's consulate. Find out who may have been behind it. So this is more of kind of the a mystery event investigation, kind of a whodunit type of situation. Again, it's similar to that first one where you are looking for an individual, you're trying to find clues, you're talking to other people. That's how any good investigation is done. You're getting stories from others, you're kind of comparing them together, and then you're trying to figure out who did it. And I think another fun way to possibly maybe end this type of encounter would be to have them, let's say they're in the Republic Senate, and let's say the chancellor has announced, that this person is missing, and then maybe your Politico stands up and states their case as to why they think, person X did this, kind of to the surprise of the Senate, kind of like a big reveal type of situation. Could be interesting. And then the last one is a crooked imperial benefactor has the representatives of his planet under his political control, convince them to escape his manipulation, or it could just be maybe this is one of the main missions of your entire campaign, for the players to find this imperial benefactor, and they need to kill him or do something to kind of stop this corruption. So again, you have this big person at the top who's pulling the strings, and you're trying to help the people underneath them. Maybe these politicians that you are trying to convince, maybe they are also really corrupt, or they are completely driven by money, and so it's going to be really difficult to kind of convince them to do this. And maybe you're going to come at them with an alternative benefit that they might get out of this type of situation. So those are just some examples that I figured I'd offer. Again, this is going to be one of those encounters that is not going to be common. It's not going to be something you should do all the time. It could be like a little mini type of mystery, whatever situation where you are asking your crew to do something a little bit more in depth rather than just going out and killing Imperials or whatever they might be doing otherwise. So I think that's everything that I wanted to go over regarding this. Hopefully you enjoyed it, got something out of it, and I will see you all soon.